Welcome everyone to Phone Show Chat PSC 900, recording this on Monday the 29th of June 2026. I am Steve Litchfield. I have travelled all the way up to North Wales. I've gaffer taped Ted to his bedpost and I've taken over the podcast manager's chair. Hello everyone, and hello Ted. Sorry about that.
Get out of my bedroom. Hello Steve, welcome back to Steve. As he says, this is PSC 900. Joe's here as well. Hello Joe.
Hello there.
What? And we're going to celebrate 900 shows. 2009, as we discovered last year when we changed things around, was the start point of this, and 900 shows later. Now, anyone that wants to get their calculator out, don't forget that during COVID particularly, we did 2 a week. And since Steve has stepped back, Joe and I often do once a fortnight. So the equation won't quite work with 2009, but we guarantee you it is show 900. And we've got lots of things to reminisce about. Mainly, I suppose, a retrospective, Steve, about what was going on back then, and the devices over the years. We both prepared some data about that. So maybe you should just take it away. Just to mention that the Phone Show Chat .uk is our website. That's 2 S's in the middle, and everything else you'll find we're doing on MeWe or PodHub UK or tedsalmon.com. So yes, Steve, lead us through into what we can talk about.
Well, first of all, I should just say that I've either got horrible hay fever or horrible summer cold, and I'm not entirely sure which. So if I want to sneeze, I will mute myself and hopefully won't inflict it on the rest of the population. But we'll press on, I think. I know, Joe, you've got hay fever as well. So between the microphone muting, we'll find some good chat. I wanted to just cover where I am, really. I've retired, semi-retired, I guess, about a year ago, certainly from PSC. But I have been finding the time to do some extra YouTube long videos, landscape, especially for Ted.
Hey.
But they're not all phone related. Some are. They're definitely not phone shows, but I am enjoying doing them. It's stuff I think about, stuff that occurs to me, stuff I want to do a video about. And no AI in sight. It's just all me chatting about topics. So do go and check out my YouTube channel. I'm sure Ted will link it in the show notes. And I've been getting some good comments and some good traction there. The big project that's kind of been my 2026 thing is my Symbian Museum. Now that was where I sort of started in the sort of handheld and mobile world. First it was Scion Palmtops back in the 1990s, way before Joe was born. And then of course the Symbian and Nokia dominance in the 2000s. And I had quite a few classic devices I've been collecting for ages, stuff that I just didn't want to give away. Annoyingly, there was a collector, I think in New Zealand or Australia about 4 or 5 years ago, and he wanted a dozen of my devices, and I thought, well, they're not absolute classics, so I sold them to him for a song. But I've kind of regretted it, so I've been kind of collecting back and in some cases buying back. So thank you to the people who have donated devices, and I've now got this Symbian Museum online, again link in the show notes, with what I consider some of the landmark devices, the devices that were really different and which defined the 2000s for me. The one I had to buy in that actually cost real money really was the Nokia 9300i communicator, which is pretty darn rare, and especially in mint condition. So I just make an exception of that. And it would have been my oldest working Symbian smartphone, but I've now managed to resurrect, literally with bits of wire and silver foil and external battery chargers. It's a complete Blue Peter hodgepodge. I've now resurrected the Nokia 9210 from 2000, so over a quarter of a century ago, and it still works. It doesn't charge the battery in situ, because I think it was water damaged at some point. But yeah, as long as I can charge the battery externally, and I've managed to install all my old OPL games, and we'll probably come to that in a moment. But it's, 26-year-old's communicator, Ted, now up and working again.
Fantastic. I really liked Series 80, and those I could not afford one though. Well, not until they were a few years old, and I had to kind of use one retrospectively where I could. But the 9300i was a big step up over the 9300, I recall, and I think it added Bluetooth to the mix, which it didn't have before. And it was the little brother of the 9500, of course. So that was all really nice. But yeah, going way right back to the 9210, in the end I had the 9210i, I think, and they were just really nice. And then that led the way under S60, as you well know, to the E90, which we've spoken about. Did anyone send you an E90? No, you had one, didn't you?
Yeah, I had one originally, and I think it either broke or I managed to sell it to someone for a song who needed one for some reason, and then somebody else donated another one. So whatever happens, I've ended up with a fairly good condition E90 in full working order, and that forms part of the centerpiece of the museum as well. And the E90 was one of the ones we bonded over on PSE because that coincided with the reign of phone show chat and our recording years.
Yeah.
And to have this sort of classic communicator that you could knock nails into wood with, and we both loved it at the time. So. But over on the Symbian Museum pages, I've kind of done a write-up I've done 3 or 4 original photographs where possible. It's not just a bog standard, this is a device on a white background. I've tried to do sort of still life with it, showing a genuine display against a real natural background. So hopefully they're attractive photos. And I've done 3, 4, 5 paragraphs on each, explaining why each of the phones in the whole museum, why it's there, what its significance was, and what the pros and cons were. So hopefully there's plenty of good reading there, spread over about 4 pages.
Yeah, good stuff. And I have looked at it, but I haven't looked at it this week. So if you've made changes, then I'll catch up with that for sure.
Joe, can I ask at which point in the years from 1991 to 2026, when you started in your smartphone journey, which year shall we kick you in?
Oh, see, I had a HTC. I think it was Desire, but I can't remember. But I very soon after swapped it for a BlackBerry Bold because my wife had a BlackBerry Bold and I wanted to BB chat her. So I'm not sure where that would fit, but because I didn't used to be massively into devices as much as I am now. I was quite a late bloomer with being into mobile devices, and it was actually during lockdown I watched a lot of YouTube. I found Phone Show Chat and your YouTube channel and all sorts, and that's when I became a big fan, really.
You had rather a lot of catching up to do.
I did indeed, yeah. I had a lot of time on my hands though, so
yeah,
I could catch up quite easily.
1.5 decades of the phone show and almost 1.5 decades of PSC. That will have taken you right through to 2022. The HTC Desire, Ted, that you loved that. That was, I'm guessing, around 2011, 2012.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't checked that, but hang on a minute. I've got a list here because knowing you were coming on, the Desire was the same era as the Nexus One, and so have I put that in there? Oh no, I haven't put it in there.
It's around that time anyway.
Yeah. And the next, if you remember, that was probably the only time I ever did a phone show video with in cahoots with you. I held the HTC Desire and the Nexus One in each hand, and when I look back at that video now, I think, good grief, that was just so dreadful, and it reminds me of how difficult it is for people like you and Joe to actually do presenting well to camera, and how it's an art that I suppose if you do more of it, you get used to it, you get better at it, like anything in life. But that day down in Singleton there, I was so unconfident, and incompetent. But I love those 2 phones, and the nicest one of the two I thought was the Nexus One. I couldn't wait for the Nexus One to arrive. I was itching. I had to import it from America, and I was sitting at the on the doormat on the day it was coming, and I had to pay import duty on it, but Google were not releasing it worldwide at that stage, and I was just overjoyed. And the Nexus One I thought had arrived. So yeah. That was my start on the Desire, Joe. No, your Windows Phone was either BlackBerry 10 or the old BlackBerry, wasn't it? So kicking around that time. Steve, you've got a chart that kind of depicts all this, haven't you?
Yeah, you can possibly link to it in the show notes. It kind of
Yeah.
it was my attempt to depict the eras, the reign, if you like, of each of the different mobile OSs, and I haven't included some of the outliers like Firefox OS and what's the one, the KaiOS and the Sailfish. They're all minor things with very minor market share, but anything with major market share I've included in the chart, and I'll run it down for sort of, there's about 9 different smartphone OS over about a quarter of a century. So bearing in mind that Joe didn't enter this chart until 2012, Joe will have to take a back seat for a while, I think. So my mobile journey started back in the Scion days, so 1991, Ted. The chart will explain, if people have this up on screen while you listen, because it shows the length of the reign of each of the mobile OSs. So when they were launched until when they were kind of phased out. And also whether they were 16-bit, 32-bit, and later on 64-bit, to show the developing power of these mobile OS. So Scion 1991 with the original Scion Series 3 for me, my first mobile device, and that ran till about 1995. This was SIBO, Single Board Organizer, if I remember rightly, otherwise known as Epoch 16. I think, Ted, you might have had a Series 3 back in the day.
I did, yeah. When Scion became clamshell handheld over the industrial kind of things that shops used to use to do whatever they did in their stock keeping and whatever. When it switched over to the clamshell, I was in, and because I had come from a background of going down to Dixon's and buying Sharp IQ organisers, and I was really, really into the digital organizer thing, and so Scion, yes, but the first batch of Scions, the Series 3, that you're depicting with the SIBO 16-bit, the one I preferred the most was the 3MX. It seemed to be more polished. You'll know the nitty-gritty, but they upped the specs, and they brought it much more forward than anything Scion Series 3 before, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the fastest and by far the best Series 3 to own. It had the infrared transmission to a little modem, so you could actually get the 3MX online in a basic fashion, which was quite fun. Before these Series 3s, actually, I know you were referring those to the sort of shop alphabetic portrait block organizers, and I had a friend who was waxing lyrical about this in about 1990, a year before, and I took one look at it. I thought, I can't enter text on that. The keyboard goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I thought, this is ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, they brought out the Series 3, and not only had a proper keyboard in the right order, it brought to the front this OPL programming language. And what caught my eye was not the fact just that I had mobile technology in my hand. It was the fact that I could create my own applications. I could literally write whatever I could imagine. I could write it and implement it with a full GUI on a handheld screen and take it with me, and that just hooked me. And of course, that's where I started the Scion Shareware library, and that's when I went full time. In 1995, again, follow along with the chart at home if you've got it open.
Steve, before you move away from those shop blocky A to Z ones,
organisers,
I just want to mention for Joe's benefit, really, that that was what I saw on the desk at somebody had brought one along to the pub meet.
Yes, yeah.
Was that Malcolm? I think it might have been Malcolm's, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you had a chance to have a look at one. I don't know if you picked it up or not, but you at least know what we're talking about there.
Yeah, I had a quick play of everything in there, and I loved the hardware. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those original organisers, they were designed for businesses and industry, so of course they were just tough as nails. There was actually a version of the Series 3 operating system, Ted, with the was it the Workabout, if I remember rightly? I don't know if you remember that. It was kind of the same software as on the Series 3, but kind of reconfigured and slightly limited, and with some enterprise apps, but done in that portrait, tough as nails format. And it was, rubberized on all the corners. You could drop it, you could dunk it in acid and all the rest of it, and it would just carry on working. And I always lusted after one of those, but they were insanely expensive, and I would have hated the keyboard. But anyway. So 1995 onwards, then Series 5 and Epoch 32, so up to a 32-bit mobile OS at this point. This is all a fully multitasking OS, as is usual with Scion, but this time they brought in a touchscreen. So this is 12 years before the iPhone, and yet we had a full multitasking, incredibly fast touchscreen UI that ran for about a week or so on 2 AA batteries, and I love mine. I presume you had a Series 5 as well.
And my favourite was when they introduced the colour and the Series 7. I remember really clearly saving up my 700 quid or whatever it was. I think it was 699 for the Scion Series 7, which is not the same format as the 5, but it was just gorgeous, and I loved it, and much more so than the 5. I think that you liked the 5 because it was really pocketable. This is more like a mini laptop.
Yeah, I can't remember the industrial version of the Series 7. Was it just called the Netbook? Something like that.
Yes, that's right, it was. But it had this lovely blue leather back on it. And
and
a stylus in it as well, like the 5.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think the story is that the Scion released the industrial version, and it was so nice with the flexible leather covering the hinge and the mechanism and so forth. And as you say, it's larger and with almost a full size QWERTY keyboard. That the consumer side of the Scion will said, we want one of those.
Yeah.
But we don't want to pay 1,000 whatever it was at the time. So they said there's enough demand. We're going to make a Series 7, as you say, and I think the Series 7 did pretty well, although you couldn't read the screen in sunlight, which was a bit of a downer if you actually wanted to be a road warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't as clear because it's colour, a bit like we're finding with these colour Kindle books type devices now. Putting a layer of colour over it just diminishes the clarity, the contrast of the mono screen. Yeah.
Yeah. While this was happening, we're now back 1995 to 1999. We had Palm OS. We had 4 years or so of Palm OS, which was 32-bit, like the Scion's Epoch 32, but it actually emulated a 16-bit system, and I can't remember the reason why, but it did ultimately limit the sort of the scope of the applications Palm OS could run. I had the Palm 3, I had the color one, which I forget the name of, and I had several of the handspring trios. The Trio 270, I think, was the first color real smartphone. The previous Palms have been PDAs like the Scion's organizers, but about 2001, 2002, we started to get what we now think of as smartphones, where the PDAs had connectivity built in as well. Did you ever have a Palm organizer?
I didn't like Palm. I did try it. I got them in, and I read your Palmtops magazine very closely, and I really, really tried it, but I just didn't like it. I was so used to where I come from with Scion that it just wasn't the same, and so I just gave up really quickly and moved on.
Yeah, the colour Palm I was trying to remember, that was the 3C, I just remembered, yeah. And I was so excited. When I saw a colour screen on a handheld device in one of our pub meets, I thought, this is just the future. It was only 240 by 240 pixels, which seems the size of an icon these days. That was the entire screen. And yet someone was playing Galaxians in colour on a Palm 3C at the pub meet, and I was utterly transfixed. But more than that, there's a bigger story at heart. There's Windows CE, Pocket PC, that was all running Microsoft, playing around with its own PDAs, and eventually also building in connectivity. But before all of that, there was a moment which I I'm just about to do a video script on, and we were at a Scion and Palm pub meet. This is around the year 2000, maybe late 99, Christmas 99 perhaps. And we were celebrating, the Ericsson SH888, the titanium mobile phone with the infrared modem built in, wonderful gadget, and various Scions and Palms. And then Rick Andrews, a good friend from in Reading near here, he pulled out of his pocket a prototype of the original Nokia 9210 and said, "No, okay, this is all great, but this is the future." And he pulled this out of his pocket. I said, and everything was in one: landscape screen, full QWERTY keyboard, multitasking OS, color screen. It was just the bee's knees. Now we know in hindsight it was relatively limited, but it did show the future. And again, this is late 99, early 2000. And that was one of the first Symbian devices we saw. We then saw Sony Ericsson do things like the P800, P900 series with the touchscreen in portrait form factor, unusually a tabbed portrait UI with a touchscreen that you operated using a plastic stylus that clipped into the bottom or clipped onto the side on the P800s. Do you ever experiment with UIQ and the P800?
I did, but before we go there, I just wanted to mention the Windows Pocket PC stuff, because I did visit that, and that would have been about the time that you were playing with Palm more, I think, and I was more playing with the Windows CE, Pocket PC, Windows Mobile, because I was just baked into Microsoft and Windows, and I remember trying to use Cywin with Windows and Outlook 2003 eventually. I remember having the HP Jornada,
yeah, and the iPacs from Compaq as well.
The iPac. I had the Jam, and I particularly liked the Jam series, and so I did buy and sell and get stuck into that whole Pocket PC thing. Yes, for sure. And I really liked that. I liked the way it worked. The only thing that annoyed me was that the synchronization with anything really, with Windows, with Outlook, was just appalling, and it just didn't work. And that's why I was so elated when Android came along, and I opened up my Google accounts, and it suddenly all worked, and Google had done it right. But going back to your question, UIQ, yes, absolutely. I can remember being absolutely wowed by having the P800, the Sony Ericsson P800. I remember very clearly. I was sat in my car, and I had the toothpick out of the stylus, and I got online, and I was surfing the web, and the people that were in the car with me were just gobsmacked, looking over my shoulder at what I was doing. And that, to me, was a real big turning point. UIQ just was so clever and so enjoyable to use. But you were a fan too.
Yeah, I had a P800 for a while. I loved the idea of you could have what looked like a normal phone, and then the flip opens up, and beneath it was the full touchscreen UI, and you could literally choose which form factor you want. I love phones which change their form factor, as indeed many of those Pocket PCs and early Windows mobile devices did as well. And of course, back in the Symbian world, I was a big Nokia fan. It seemed like every month back then, on one of the three platforms, you had a different form factor, Ted. It was so exciting. There was literally something you'd never seen before appearing month after month after month. Things which swiveled and tilted and hinged. And it was just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you particularly were really into the N series, weren't you? I don't know if I've skipped too far forward there, but because of the audio stuff, you were really into the N series. Not so much for me. I remember very fondly the 7650 and the 6680, which were basic candy bar phones, but they were really nice, leading up to the kind of era of the N95, and which I'm sure you'll come to in a second. But in that little space there, I think that, playing with the N gauge, for example, and, things, you're right, things that changed form in front of you. And it was just great, wasn't it?
Yeah, the N series for me, although they did have great audio as the years went on and they had headphone jacks appeared and so forth, it was really the cameras, as you won't be surprised to learn. They had the N70 I had fond memories of. And while I'm here, by the way, for my Symbian Museum, I haven't got an N70 or indeed a 9500. If anyone out there's got a spare one gathering dust in a drawer, working or not, then do drop me a line. I'd love to add those two to the museum properly. The N70, I think, was 2 megapixel fixed focus, but it was the first smartphone camera that took photographs that were good enough that you could use them instead of a real camera. The N90, I've still got one in the museum here with a sort of twist camera on the end. That was also 2 megapixels, but autofocus. So you had autofocus in a smartphone camera for the first time with a Carl Zeiss lens. Then the N93, same idea, but 3 megapixels with a genuine 3 times telescopic zoom. And then we're up to this landmarked period, 2007, early January or so, the Nokia N95. The slogan was, "It's what computers have become," and there's not one thing in my pocket but many. And there was a whole presentation, and it was a landmark device because the N95 was the smartphone that had everything you'd recognize in a modern smartphone. It was the first one to integrate Wi-Fi and GPS and Bluetooth and stereo speakers and a great autofocus camera. And all of those things would still form the basis of our cameras and our smartphones 20 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Sadly, I do remember dancing between the N95 and the N95 8 GB. The rails were, maybe I'm remembering it from the first generation and not the 8 GB one, but I do remember that the running rails were often kind of not breaking, but not being quite right on them. Do you remember that?
Yeah. What happened was the early N95s, and I had one of the pre-production ones, one of the first off the production line, because they literally hand delivered it to me and a few other Symbian and Nokia friendly bloggers around the country, which is very exciting. 11 p.m. at night, knock on the door, and it's the Nokia PR people, two of them, and I invited them in for tea and toast, and they handed over this big box. Wonderful. And that was rock solid. But as the N95 started to sell million after million after million, they started outsourcing the manufacturing to cheaper and cheaper sources around the world. And there were batteries with very floppy sides, as you remember. They kind of bent outwards and then everything got derailed. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've seen it demonstrated. But yeah, my N95, and indeed the one, my sort of demo unit I've got in the museum here is kind of rock solid. But yeah, the more units of something you make, the larger scale you have to think in terms of manufacturing and quality. And that's where companies like Samsung, Google and Apple have just got it made in the current age, because they have the scale to be able to do that and make tens of millions of something without too many of them going wrong, which is just really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Where does the N86 fit in? Because we both really liked that, didn't we? And by then, I think there was nothing wrong with that phone. It worked beautifully both ways. The slide was perfect, and we both had the black one and really liked it, didn't we?
Yeah, the N86 8 megapixel, to give it its full title, I think that was 2009. So we've now moved on 4 years, and it was the very last. It was the last hurrah of S60 in the sort of sliding T9 form factor. As you say, it's an immaculate device. You can pick it up today and think, wow, this is like is it the famous Sirocco that you love from the modern Nokia? It's something you pick up and you think, oh, I just love holding this, and you slide it backwards and forwards in this case, and it's still rock solid all these years later, and it had a fabulous camera, and it just felt $1 million. But that was the ultimate refinement of that design. There's a little thing called the iPhone, which appeared 2 years before that. 2007, just a complete looking across my OS chart. The first two iPhones, people think, well, the world changed in 2007 with Apple coming in. It kind of did, but it also didn't. The first few iPhones, they were so limited. And I had a friend up the road who had the original iPhone, then the iPhone 3G, then the iPhone 3GS. And I kept borrowing them and comparing them to all my famous classic Nokias. And I kept dismissing the iPhone. It just wasn't up there in terms of functionality and specifications. Then they got to 2010, and I'll just name drop the iPhone 4, because I managed to get one at a mint condition iPhone 4 fully working on eBay for 20 quid the other day, and I'm pleased as punch with it, because it was the moment when industrial design and beauty and functionality all came together. All of a sudden, you had a device in your pocket in the iPhone 4, which was stainless steel and Gorilla Glass and a Retina, really high resolution screen, and a decent enough camera, and all that functionality of iOS, which by that time did have copy and paste, and L had an app store that had developed as well. And that was the point where the iPhone, I had to start taking it very, very seriously. And of course, I then watched it from then all the way through up to the modern day. I should also mention, because I know you weren't big on iPhone even then, Ted, so I won't dwell on that. But at the same time, all this was happening from 2000 till about 2011. I'm putting the reign in, certainly in America, of BlackBerry OS and research in motion. Now, I was never huge on BlackBerry. Maybe we can come to Joe at this point because he did have some experience. I had a few in. I had the 99, I think it was 9000 in for review. I certainly had the Bold in for review for my phone show, but I had limited experience of BlackBerry. I just felt I couldn't cope with and becoming expert in all of these platforms. So, Joe, how do you think the BlackBerries you played with in the sort of 2009, 2010 compared to the fledgling Android and iOS and Nokias of the time?
Well, funny enough, I only ever had the one BlackBerry Bold, and that was purely to do the BB chat with my now wife. But it was fantastic for emails and messaging, which I did a lot of messaging then, because it was early days with my wife. But yeah, I was quite pleased to go to a smartphone again after, I think, because it didn't scratch the itch that I had with a nice screen.
Was the Bold the one with the leather back?
Mine had a plasticky back, I think, from memory.
Okay.
I actually bought it on Amazon.
Yeah. So BlackBerry was big, but I think although my daughter had a BlackBerry back in the day, one of sort of 2008, 9, 2010, when she was about 10, it didn't last very long, and I felt it was a bit cheap and plasticky. It wasn't one of the high-end BlackBerries, but I think BlackBerry was kind of dying a death in the UK. It's BlackBerry's heydays were really in North America in the mid 2000s. So when us in Europe, Ted, were wowing over Sony Ericsson and UIQ and Symbian and Nokia Series 60, Series 80, all of that, and the cameras and the specifications and the audio, BlackBerry had its own thing going over in the Americas.
Yeah, and to some degree in Europe as well. In the UK, I knew people that were absolutely sold on BlackBerry in the way that people are completely sold hook, line and sinker on iOS and Apple stuff now. They would not consider anything else. They just thought it was absolutely brilliant. I had the same as you, Steve. I think I dabbled with it, and I had the various. We particularly focused, the two of us, on the Passport when it came along, but it was just kind of locked down. It felt very business-like. It felt very Microsoft-like. It felt like it was, you had to use their tools to do most stuff, and it was just a walled garden, and it was locked down, and the security was really good because of it, and that's one of the reasons why businesses went for it, not consumers. But my memory was that those people around me that used BlackBerry were just complete fanboys and girls.
Yeah, I can see how that can be, because the typing experience was fantastic, and like I say, that was my main purpose. We were just messaging 24/7 all the time to each other, but then emails at work were fantastic on it as well. So I can see where the business side of it came in. I think my generation, where texting was a bit clunky, and BB chat being so instant and not costing anything, was fantastic. That's the cost implication of it is huge, which is why it blew up in the US, isn't it?
Yeah, we should of course mention that two things. One is that BlackBerry, I put it on the chart in the two distinct eras with two distinct different mobile operating systems.
Yeah.
There was BlackBerry's own OS, which ran to about 2011, 2012, and then they switched over to BlackBerry 10, which was based on QNX, if I remember rightly, which was a real-time multitasking operating system they bought in. And then we had a range of from 2012 to 2018, 2019, BlackBerry 10 devices. And then, of course, they carried on, but with a few of the Android phones that
Yes.
I think you had some hands on the Key 1, Key 2, and so forth, which I really
Yeah.
like. So there's lots to like from BlackBerry over that 1.5 decades, but it's a tiny bit patchy in terms of the software it runs and what it's compatible with.
When they started doing the Android devices, I was sold on those. I thought they were great, having come from a background of the the E6, the Nokia E6, and the E61, and those kind of QWERTY. What we're
Yeah.
seeing now in the Titan, the Titan, what's it? The Key 1 and the Key 2. I had both of those, and I thought they were just brilliant. Worked really well. I don't know how on earth, looking back now, I could have used them so efficiently, because my thumbs are huge and the keys are tiny, and I just don't get why, even especially the E6 I mentioned, Steve, the Nokia E6. When I picked one of those up relatively recently, I thought, you're joking. How did I type on that?
You had more patience then, Ted.
Yeah, probably.
Or thinner fingers.
Yeah. Have either of you two gentlemen seen the BlackBerry film? I know it's over dramatized, but it was quite interesting.
Yes,
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I watched it about a year ago, and I find it really enlightening. I mean, I didn't know much about the BlackBerry story, and assuming that some of it is true,
Yeah.
then I found it quite revealing about the different characters. Obviously, they emphasized everything to the point of melodrama, but I still found it well worth a watch.
It seemed I was quite stubborn, didn't it? And head in the ground, they didn't realise the competition was coming.
Yeah. Well, indeed, neither did Nokia back in the day. Of course,
Yeah.
the heads were rolling and people were scampering in 2007 when Apple did launch the iPhone. And I know Nokia was still 62% market share at that point worldwide, which is massive. But they could see that something had to change, and that's when Nokia pivoted onto S65th edition, then Symbian 3, Symbian Anna, Symbian Bell, and trying to make touchscreens work again within the Symbian world. And they never quite did, because they always held back a bit too much in terms of the specs. You may remember also 2009, the same year as the N86 TED, they also launched the N97, the infamous N97, which was an incredible idea of a cantilevered hinge over a QWERTY keyboard and best specs externally in terms of cameras and functionality, and yet the internals were so hampered by the resistive touchscreen and by the limited flash memory and limited processor. If only they'd put more oomph inside somehow to compete with what was happening around with them in terms of Android and iOS, the N97 would have been genuinely unique and been more of a success, I think.
And the Mini as well. In some ways, apart from it being smaller, the Mini was had better specs inside it, as I recall. But I think, looking back, I seem to be the only person in our circles anyway that really liked the N97, despite its flaws and all the rest of it. And when the Mini came along, as I say, apart from it being smaller, it kind of did the job. And then, of course, we got the E71, didn't we? Not the E71, the
E7.
The E7, yeah. And that kind of took the idea a bit further, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same cantilevered keyboard and hinge and so forth. In fact, that was so much loved by certain people that our good friend at FX Tech, he went and copied the design wholesale for his FX Tech Pro 1, the Android smartphone, which we both had in, and they kind of made the keyboard a bit too small and fiddly for me. But the idea was there, and it took the N97 and E7 formula and brought it into sort of 2017, 2018, 2019 territory.
Yeah, that was really good. And again, I think that was on the table, Joe, at the pub meet. Didn't someone bring... In fact, I've got a feeling that the one that we both had kicking about, Steve, was given to Malcolm, wasn't it? And didn't he bring it along, Joe?
It was Malcolm that brought that.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah. That's what I was referring to hardware-wise. I didn't realise where you was at earlier. But my comment with the hardware still stands. But yeah,
I think you were confusing actually two devices, Joe. I think you had the Gemini PDA on display, the Gem from Planet Computers.
Oh no, yeah, that's what we had. Yeah. That's what Malcolm brought in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
the Gemini, as people will know if they've been watching my phone show over the last 15 years, came out about 6 or 7 years ago and was basically a Scion Series 5 keyboard from the 1990s, tethered with a really clever hinge again, with a full color screen, stereo speakers, and Android 7, which was then later updated to Android 8. And it was a really, really nice device. I still love using it today, but it's so limited in terms of the lack of support. Planet computers just couldn't scale up to support more than a few hundred users, seemingly. So there were delays shipping and delays in updating it, and it was all a bit of a disaster. And there was a follow-up Cosmo communicator, same idea, and then the Astro Slide, which was just appalling disaster of a device. But yeah, and beside that, Joe, we also had this FX Tech, which was this cantilevered, not a hinge, it was a cantilevered screen that popped up and slid away from you, revealing a QWERTY keyboard. And I've still got the FX Tech Pro 1 here, Ted, if you ever need to borrow it back for nostalgia.
Well, in that case, it wasn't on the table. I must have been mistaken. I thought I saw that as well as the Gemini in front of Malcolm there, but obviously not. Okay.
So many classic devices. Having talked about the Blackberries, of course, the whole idea is carried on with the Clicks communicator coming out later this year from one of the guys who ran the main BlackBerry third-party site, who's Kevin Michalek. Is that the right name? Yeah, the Clicks communicator. I haven't got my name down for that anymore. I am expecting their Pro 1 keyboard to arrive any moment, but I assume both of you would like a look at the Clicks communicator from one of our usual tech family at some point in the near future.
Probably Joe more than me. As I say, I've got kind of disheartened by this whole little QWERTY thing because I can't use it. It's too small for me, and so I just we've also got the Titan Elite thingy, whatever it's called, kicking about, and it's just too small. But Joe, you can take the lead on that.
Yeah, I absolutely am really excited to try one. And I think it's nostalgia of the typing experience. I might message my wife loads just for that nostalgia as well. She'd be like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, the keyboard on the Clicks communicator is wider than that on the Clicks add-on keyboard you tried last year, Ted, and it's certainly wider than on the old standard Blackberries and the old Nokia E71, etc. So you might not be so disappointed as you think you might be.
Certainly the original Titan was better. So the big brick of the Titan, I think
it's similar. Yeah,
the Unihertz Titan, that was bigger and it was better certainly. But yeah, okay.
There's a lot to like about the Clicks just quickly as well, which like features like the light that goes around the power button for notifications.
Oh,
you can change the color and the backlit comes off, and there's loads of things on there that I'm excited to try. But Back in history, here we go.
Well, going back, talking of lights around power buttons and fancy lighting, going back to Ted's famous and much loved, and also here, the Nexus 1, which had did I remember rightly, Ted? It had a multicolour rollerball pointing device at the below the screen.
It was great. It's a notification light, and as you say, you can assign different colours to do different things on that. It also clicks in as an executable, a return button, and you, as you say, you can roll it around under your thumb as a cursor on the screen. It was great, a great idea, and it's a real shame that didn't continue, in my view. Yeah.
Ever thought of starting an Android museum? Your end?
I think it's the task would be huge, wouldn't it? I think it's just too big. There's so many millions of Android devices that have been created over the years. You wouldn't stand a chance. I'll defer to
niche, Ted.
I'll defer to Ben Woods on that. Sorry, Joe.
You should have a niche of Motorola museum.
Yeah, you could do that, I suppose. Yeah, you could narrow it down to an OEM and do that for sure. Yeah, or a Pixel one. A Pixel one would be quite easy, probably. Yeah, a Nexus Pixel one. Yeah,
it was interesting to even pick which devices went into my Symbian museum, because I if you add up the number of Symbian powered devices, I mean, never mind Apple and Android and Windows Phone and BlackBerry, there's so many phones released, as you say, over that decade. So even the Symbian devices, there was something like 60 or 70, and I don't want 60 or 70 phones in my office, filling up my cupboards, and also having to write the history and the pros and cons of 70 devices. So I had to carefully pick which ones I thought were the most influential, the ones that the most interesting, and the ones that were most different. So that was kind of interesting, just to see which ones I was picking out. The last one in the last Symbian device, obviously, was the physically last one, which was the Nokia 808 in 2012, which is. I did a video up recently, we'll link in the show notes, called The Most Influential Smartphones of All Time. This is across all platforms, all times, right up to the modern era. I chose the N95 for reasons aforementioned, the first phone that had just everything in it, spec-wise. Then the iPhone 4, about 3-4 years later, because it was such a classic design and reintroduced the modern slab form factor with modern materials, the very first phone to do that. And then the 808, as I say, it had this high megapixel camera, and it was the dawn of computational photography. For the first time, you used more megapixels than you need, and you crunched them down with processing to get purer and better images. And that's where all of this smartphone imaging we've had since came from. And then finally, the fourth one, which is with video from your good self, Ted, completely out of left field, and with possibly an eye to the iPhone Ultra and the Samsung, whatever it's going to be called, Fold 8 or 8 Fold later this year, I thought, do you know what? Most influential smartphones of all time, I'm going to put the Pixel Fold in there, because although it didn't sell very many, it's still a unique form factor, still sought after. People are always asking for them in our forums, and it's about to be copied by the biggest manufacturers on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go back to it a lot. And particularly since they've extended the support to Android 18, and they put another 2 years on the security updates, that they've re-embraced it, quite possibly because they saw others around them, nicking their idea and making this. But we have to give a nod also here to Huawei, who have taken the idea, I think, possibly even further. And Joe, we've spoken about the Huawei. What's it called? The Pure X.
The Pura, yeah, the Pura phones.
The Pura, great. That's the one. And they just have taken that whole book idea, not too tall but wider, the same as the Pixel Fold. And they're running with it, and they're doing really well. Again, just such a shame we can't really sensibly get them here. But yeah. So yes, Steve, I'm with you on that, and I think the Pixel Fold is unique in many ways, particularly the orientation of it, and I very, very often find my way back to it and use it, and it's just great.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one final mobile OS we should mention. I mean, all of these we've mentioned over the last sort of 2010 onwards, they've all been 32-bit. There's one more 32-bit one. That was Windows Phone, Windows Phone 7, Windows Phone 8, and Windows 10 Mobile. Ironically, not all of which are compatible with each other. They kind of broke compatibility as they went along, which is rather a shame and rather helped their downfall. Windows Phone, it was the user interface with the tiles and the swiping left to go between sort of different large fonted tabs. It was a bit of a love it or hate it Marmite UI, and I gather you were a hate it camp, Ted.
I didn't like it at all. No, I have to admit, I didn't like the way that the live tiles worked. It annoyed me. Again, I was coming from being so happy with Google and what they were doing with Android that anything else was going to be a real tall ask for me to get into. In actual fact, when I tried to look at it objectively and I used a Windows Phone, apart from the live tiles, I did like the way in which lots of it worked. It's just that ultimately I was so baked into Android by then that it didn't stand a chance. But lots of people liked it, didn't they?
Yeah, it never got more than about 10% market share, and that's only in Europe, I think. The reason I went to a Windows Phone at all were two reasons. One was that the Lumia 1020 came along, which took the 808's camera and added optical image stabilization and reframing after the fact and so forth. There was so much to like camera-wise. And then there was the 1520, which was a giant one, which was a phone larger than almost any other phone in existence. Yeah,
not now.
Well, it wouldn't be that small now. I mean, even today, you would just think of it as a quote compact phone. You wouldn't think of it as minuscule. If you pick up the iPhone 4 from 2010 now, which I did the other day, it really is. It's dinky. Dinky is the only word. It's minuscule compared to what we have today. But the 1520 was up with the sort of phone screen sizes you would see in 2026. But Windows Phone ultimately died a death. Nokia didn't put enough force and input behind it in conjunction with Microsoft. Then Nokia's sales were falling off a cliff because of the bad management and the death of Symbian. Then Microsoft bought Nokia. Then Microsoft pulled out and ended up making Windows 10 Mobile, which was kind of an idea, universal Windows platform. They thought, let's make a phone operating system that's the exact same as our desktop operating system, with the same core running the same apps. And it was an admirable goal, but it never really happened. And UWP apps, which you can still see online and on Windows today, they're in the minority, and Microsoft realized they could never push that through. So they pulled the plug on Windows Phone, or Windows 10 Mobile as it was then in 2015. And a year later after that, of course, they released the Nokia name, and that's when Nokia under HMD were able to spring up and then produce some of your best loved Android devices, Ted.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to, at the risk of upsetting you, I just checked with GSM Arena for the Nokia Lumia 1520, and the screen size is, ready for this, 6 inches. So that is smaller than the Pixel 9. In fact, it's smaller than most phones, isn't it, if it's only 6 inches diagonal?
But it was a different aspect ratio, Ted. That was 6 inches, 16 by 9, which is probably as large a screen area than your current Pixel at 18 by 9.
More
anyway,
like
it was huge for the day. Joe, the Windows Phone was actually in your era here, so were you aware of it, and did you try many Windows Phone devices?
No, I didn't. I was very much into Samsung during that period. I know Sam's a huge fan and would love Windows Phone to come back, but it's not happening, Sam. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I was so into Samsung at that point. Remember, I wasn't as into trying different devices. I was on the 2 or 3 year cycle. At the time, it was 1-to-1 I was with.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention there is a link I've got with being at O2 now. In 2007, O2 was the first UK carrier exclusively to have the iPhone 1. I don't know if you was aware of that. Do you recall that at all?
Yeah. I remember that. They also had a deal on the on some of those aforementioned Windows mobile devices, didn't they? You had the O2 PDAs and all of that.
Yes,
I think O2 were in quite early on all that, weren't they?
Yeah, they've got a good history of launching devices.
Well, they came from Cellnet, didn't they? BT and Cellnet.
BT Cellnet, yes, that's right.
And then O2, so the path was there, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I just wanted to get my little bit of link to history in there.
So Apple's iOS and Google's Android, they were started off 32-bit, and then iOS 7 onwards. So I'm guessing that was 2012, 2013, they jumped to 64-bit, and Android, I think, roughly the same sort of time, Ted, which meant again that their apps had a break in compatibility. But 64-bit is where we are today. So that was the point, 2013, 2014-ish, when the smartphones of then would, in theory, not in practice, but in theory, be compatible with what we have today. And I guess that was the future, because BlackBerry was dying, so BlackBerry 10 never really took off. Symbian was already dead. Windows Phone was dying. Palm OS twinkled out a good half decade further, leaving just 2 platforms, and that's why we keep talking about we nice to have a third platform in existence. But iOS and Android, to be fair, the number of skins on Android and variants in Android, and the number of places Apple has actually taken iOS in terms of investment in the software, has been quite impressive. So at least we've got 2. There are only 2 platforms, Ted, but they are pretty heavyweight platforms and pretty good competitors for each other.
And Android, if you start digging under the surface, is used just everywhere. It's such an open platform that if you go to China, and the stuff that is based on Android. I mean, for example, I was mentioning e-ink readers last a while back, and if you go into that world, then all of those devices are running on Android, and the Android is the kind of Linux bottom end of so many things out there, of cache point machines and just millions and millions of applications, because it's been made available and open source, and people can do what they like with it to some degree. Google are starting to lock that down a bit now, as we know, but to make it a bit more secure, or in a kind of Apple type way. But it's still out there in its Linux form, and everyone can just use it and do what they like with it. And because it was well coded, I think that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I've got two switch points in this whole chart for myself. One is that when I gave up on Windows Phone because it was clear that Microsoft and Nokia just lost heart, around about 2015, 2016, I then started experimenting with Android for real. But my favorite Android device was the Galaxy S9 Plus. I know the S8 was probably the more innovative, but the S9 Plus was the phone that had everything. I loved all the little biometric sensors on the back, and the telephoto camera, and the form factor, and the rounded screen. This S9 Plus was the sweet spot of Android for me for about 2 or 3 years there in the middle.
I remember you spending quite a long time reviewing that on the show as we did our phone show chat, and you kept coming back to it, and you really liked it a lot. So yes, absolutely, and it was good, and it lasted a long time. It wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was a long-lasting, well-specified phone. Yep.
Yeah. And 2020 or so is when a very kind member of the PSC community, frustrated that we weren't covering our iPhone enough, he went out and bought me an iPhone. And that was the iPhone 11 Pro, which was incredibly generous of him. And I just played with it on the side for a few weeks. And I thought, well, I'll try it as a main device. And I was immediately hit with some huge hurdles in terms of how do I get my stuff onto this phone. And you've been through all of this, Ted, on the show when you wrote your own battles. But once I figured out what the limitations were and how to circumvent them, how to work the Apple way, I kind of never moved back. And attempted several times to move back to Android because the phones were different and the functionality was better in some regards. But Apple do keep adding things, like, for example, the modern USB-C iPhones and iPads. You can just plug in a standard memory stick. You can plug in standard USB peripherals, and everything just works, just as it used to do back on my old Samsung back in the day. So I to this day, my main SIM...
Not quite, because the data is sandboxed, isn't it, in a kind of a selfish type way. And so it's not quite the same. But anyway, yeah, I take the point.
Yeah, it's sandboxed in the sense that if I want my music library, for example, on my iPhone, I have to use Apple's Music or iTunes utility to get the music onto there. But once, with that caveat, given that I've used my music on my PC or my Mac in that way anyway, using and play it through that program, then it is literally only plug a cable in and press one button. But I still, to this day, just to go back to where my main SIMs are, because it's a question you might surely hit most current guests with. I've got a 17 Pro Max here, which it was my 3-year upgrade. I treated myself, even though the 14 Pro Max still works just fine. The 17 Pro Max, and on the side of that, I've got the Xperia 1 Mark V. It's still getting daily use. It's just had its last Android 15 June 2026 update, which I still love playing. Every time I pick that up, I can't put it down. And I play with it for a few hours. It's got a pay-as-you-go SIM, and also pay-as-you-go SIM, I've got the Surface Duo Original, which I still love. And again, I picked that up, and I think this is brilliant. This is unique. This is a wonderful form factor. But there's no support. Microsoft dropped support for it, a couple of years ago now. Sony are now dropping support for the Xperia 1 Mark V, and it's just frustrating that classic form factors and classic ideas, they just get dropped, and they lose viability because of lack of support from the different manufacturers. Very sad.
Although, as we have discussed on the show, between us, Steve, that is a bit of a mindset, because these Android devices can go on and on and on, and there's no reason to give up on them, really. We know that Android OS updates are plateauing, and I've got the Xperia 5 Mark V here, which is not getting any further than Android 15, and I leap between being really annoyed about that, but then in practice, it doesn't matter. It will carry on working. You said yourself about the Play System updates for your Surface Duo, and I've got the same with the Surface Duo 2 here. As long as you keep those up to date, it may not be being developed, but in some ways, looking at the AI world and everything else that's littered with it, that might not be a bad thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I did a whole video on Play System updates and Android security and what's important and what's not. And I completely agree. I'm not going to stop using either of these devices or appreciating them just because the manufacturers have stopped issuing OS updates. But I can't decide which of them is going to be my secondary. So they both got pay as you go, giff-gaff, stroke O2 Sims in, and I love them both to bits. I can't. It's like choosing between your favourite two daughters. One other thing I want to talk about before we move into Joe's throws and whatever your section is, Ted. I don't know how we're doing for time, but I wanted to just chat because our whole community is based around MeWe. And is it just me, or in the last few weeks, have people been just deluged by scantily clad young ladies following me and presumably trying to spark up conversations? And do I just ignore them? At the moment, I'm just blocking them. And I think, is that the right thing to do, or should should I complain to MeWe?
You can complain to MeWe, but you won't get very far, because they can't control people. If people want to open an account with MeWe and then start to do that to whatever string of characters they can put together to find usernames, then it's up to them and they can't stop it. An interesting thing happened to me just this evening when I fired up my podcasting gear. I opened up a Microsoft Teams, and I looked up to the top, and there was a red button there, a notification button. When I went into it, exactly the same thing is in there. In fact, a lot of the pictures of the females are probably exactly the same. I don't think, however secure MeWe claim that their platform is, at the end of the day, you can't. What are they going to do? I mean, ask for everyone's passport and driving license before you can open an account? Well, the UK government might like them to do that by the way things are going, but at the moment you can't. It's just uncontrollable. So the advice really is just to block them or just ignore them. Let them follow you if they want to follow you, and if you want to block them, you can. I tend to block them myself. What do you do, Joe?
Well, yeah, I just ignore them because I've got this on MeWe, but I've experienced this on Instagram for quite some time now, and I think I don't know if some of them might even be bots, not even a human behind them. And what I've found is they'll follow you, you ignore them, you won't give them anything. They either get deleted, which eventually someone will manage it on MeWe, I'm sure. Or they just disappear, they just don't become active anymore. So, yeah, my advice, just ignore them. Eventually they'll go.
Right, yeah. 2 ways, Steve.
But it's a wonderful community, and it's the only social network I actually go into multiple times a day to see what's going on. And there's usually something going on. And can I just say, well done on the main PSC feed and all the news stories you feed in, because you are my 90% of my new tech news feed for the world, Ted.
Well, that's very flattering. But I'm sure that many people go and look at tech news outlets themselves. All I do really is I have a set hour in the morning when I go through the usual sites through my feed my RSS feed that comes in, and I pick out some stuff that I think might be of interest. So, if people wanted to do that themselves, they could. But yeah, it saves people doing that, and trust me to kind of pull up the most interesting things. The only thing that I don't do, which you and others could do helpfully, is to pick up on Apple stuff, because it's just off my radar, and I'm afraid I don't do that. So do feel free to add Apple stuff, and anyone else.
Yeah, Sorry, Steve. I just wanted to say I want to second what you said. Like what Ted does is brilliant. He's better than AI. Pulls all the stuff.
As a tagline.
Yeah.
Ted is better than AI.
It's quite a low bar, mind you. Just a few plugs. I know you guys get your own sections. Just a couple of plugs to remind people that my website is stevelitchfield.com with a T and Litchfield, of course, and everything's linked out from there, just as Ted does with his website. If you do follow through to read my Symbian Museum, then there are 4 different parts, and all the devices are hyperlinked, and some of them have video links as well. Follow through, and if you do watch any of my videos, either shorts or my long videos, do please, give a thumbs up and so forth, because it's the all-important algorithm. It's fascinating doing more YouTube landscape videos and watching the traffic rise and fall and realizing there's a real algorithmic technique to getting people to your videos in front of people's eyeballs. So I'm guessing the more people give me thumbs up on the different videos, the more they'll get shown to other people. So thank you in advance. And if you've got an N70 or a 9500 out there, Nokia, then rescue it from a dusty drawer and send that my way as well.
And comments help as well, Steve. Definitely comment on Steve's videos. I'm sure we'll reply when you get a chance as well. But yeah, give your thoughts on the videos, and that helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you read them?
Yeah. I read all the comments on every video, and I reply where I can. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Joe, do you read them?
Yeah, because I'm quite a small channel. I read and reply to all of them, even the nasty ones.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Steve. Good stuff. And I'd just like to mention that my favourite Android phone of all time was I think it still has to remain the Moto Z3 Play and the Moto Mod system. If I had my time again, I wouldn't have sold it all, which I did. I would have kept it, knowing our new mentality of actually that doesn't matter, because it's not that old. 2016, all right, it's 10 years old, but it will still be working, I'm sure, and kind of usable. Anyway, that was, I think, if I had to choose something over time. Joe, you put into the recording notes a list of your kind of path through what you've bought and what you've had and what have you. Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, I'll quickly go through my little history. So, obviously, I had that BlackBerry Bold, but when I went back to smartphones, I went with Samsung because it was just mainstream, and the carriers, or networks rather, in the UK would so that's too much time with Sam, isn't it? Saying carriers, the networks in the UK would push Samsung. So I went with S5. I really did enjoy it. But I enjoyed the S7 Edge more because it just felt quite premium after coming from the S5, with its build quality and that gold finish I had on there,
and the waterfall edges.
Yeah. But funny enough, I did crack that screen. Yeah, dropping it on a toilet tiles on the toilet. Yeah, I had it precariously balancing on my trousers. While I was on the toilet, and it fell down from there. Whoops. My next phone was the LG G3 because it had a wonderful big screen, had this lovely curved back on it, which, it was, and I wanted to get away from Samsung. I was starting to think about other devices and starting to research more at that point. And then I got a little bit into photography at that point as well. Not that had a very good camera. I think it was a 2 megapixel job or something like that. My next smartphone, bearing in mind I'm still getting contracts for 2 to 3 years. My next one I had for 3 years, just over 3 years, and it was the Huawei P20 Pro, which I absolutely adored. That phone. Software wasn't amazing, but the camera was excellent on it, and it had the monochrome camera, dedicated monochrome lens, which I really enjoyed. And I had that during the start of COVID lockdowns, and that's when my love of photography started to come to the forefront. But at that point, it was coming to its last legs, and that's when I was watching a hell of a lot of YouTube. I found PSC, I found Steve's channel, Juan Bagnell's channel, and loads of others. And I got talking to loads of people, and I found out how good pixels are, and everyone recommended a pixel, but I didn't want to splash out because I bought this next one outright. So I got a Pixel 5.
Woohoo!
And that's the size of that device. Was wonderful. Again, it had that strange body, didn't it? It had a metal body with like, what was it? I can't remember what the material is they built around it. But it was
sort of a resin of some kind.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And that was a wonderful device, and I loved the Pixel camera coming, despite it being all done for you. I loved the way that it worked. Almost any shot I took was decent, I think, in any light even. It really blew my mind as my first Pixel. But then a lot of my friends were like, you haven't tried a flagship Pixel though. And I was in the MeWe community at that point, and I bought my first flagship Pixel, if you like. I bought a 4XL on Classified, and then things changed from there. My next load of devices were the flagship Pixels, but I've changed a lot since then. Obviously, getting a job at O2 and changing network up, switch up came part of my life. So I changed phone every 3 months when it first launched. I've bought and sold loads of devices in Classified, and I've now got some contacts with different brands. So the phones I've tried since then has been like my whole life before that I'll do in 1 year. So yeah, it's changed a lot.
Yeah, gives a good range though, and you've obviously gone through a lot in the time you've been interested. Partly because you've been working in retail in the phone industry, I suppose, but just generating an interest, and you've done really well to, more so than I did, cooking up a decent YouTube attempt, and we hope that that continues to do well for you, and you get more followers and watchers and comments and so forth. But yes, I'm with you on a lot of those phones. I think the Huawei P30 Pro, wasn't that the one that everyone raved about for quite a long time? That was presumably the upgrade to the 20, was it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because I had a 3-year cycle. I would have been looking at the end of the P40 or the new.
Yeah, the P30 Pro was the one with the good zoom camera, and that's why people raved about it. And then the P40 Pro had even better optics, but was the first to drop standard Android and Google, and so it was kind of off to one side.
Yeah. So I had to sort of peter off somewhere else. It's funny you say that, because I have regrets in my history of going on contracts, because Steve mentioned the S9 Plus being such a great device. I nearly got that, obviously, but I went with the LG at the time because I just wanted to try something new. But if I wasn't doing such long-term contracts, I could have changed and had a 9 Plus for a little while, then had the LG for a little while. But at them times, I kept them long-term, sadly.
Yeah. I think the approach that Steve and I have usually had throughout is not getting sucked into contracts, but trying hard to afford to buy stuff or beg, borrow and steal, or get in bed with PR firms and have them sent to you, which Steve was particularly good at back in the day. You get hands on with lots of devices in lots of ways without them being locked down. And also, not so true now, I don't think, but back in the day, being buggered by your Vodafone or your O2 because they put their software layer over the top of it, and it was just really annoying. So that's what we did, Steve, wasn't it?
Yeah, in fact, I've got still some tendrils out there, and there's a new device which I should be reviewing under NDA. It's arriving this week, which I can't say a word about for another month, but it's quite exciting. So it's an upgrade for a phone from 2 years ago, and yeah, I should say no more. I'll get into trouble. I do have a sneaky podcast plan, by the way, you guys. By taking over loads of time in this podcast, I am ensuring you'll have to do a fill-in show next week, and I'll get another mid-cycle PSC from you.
Next week, actually, this one it got really confusing. Next week we do have a show, and Dan Carter's coming on, but the one after that is supposed to be the drop-in, which is 2 weeks after that. But we might, I think we'll put one in between the 6th, between the 6th of July and the 20th of July. So yeah, absolutely, we're not going to have time to go through our stuff, but hopefully we will have time now to have a look at a few of the contributions from our members and a couple of items of news. And also, perhaps before we get there, Steve, do you want to tackle the app wrap? Because you put an app in here, haven't you?
Well, I put a couple, but I'll make it quick because I know we're short on time. Car Scanner Pro, which is out for iOS and Android. We'll put links in the show notes. I'm fascinated by the fact that every car for the last, 10, 12 years has had an OBD2, it's an onboard OBD2, onboard diagnostics port. And you can buy little scanners now, little gadgets, widgets, dongles, whatever, from Amazon for about £10-20. You plug it into the port and it's got its own Wi-Fi hotspot built in. And then you use your iOS or Android smartphone to connect that Wi-Fi hotspot. And it gives you all sorts of things in terms of revs and diagnostic error codes, and you can clear codes to stop, get that check engine light off, see if it reoccurs, then you see what the error is, you can find out where the fault is. All of this without going to a garage, and it's all without wires. It just feels like the future when hooked up to your car. So we'll put a link into that. Having said that, since I started using Car Scanner Pro, there are actually other numerous OBD2 reading apps. So my pick isn't exclusive. Just try them all out and keep the one that suits you most. But I use Car Scanner Pro. And related to the Scion Palmtops, these PDAs, but landscape PDAs from the 1990s, I've been playing with an app called Opolua, OPOLUA, and that's OPO was the translated version of the old Scion OPL programs, and I'm not sure what the LUA stands for, but basically it lets you run Scion OPL apps from the 1990s and install Scion installer files, apps and games on, in my case, I've been playing with them on the iPhone. And they come up, I've put some screenshots in the notes for you guys to see. This is me showing some of my Scion icons, literally from the 1990s, running on a modern iPhone, which is just surreal, really, complete with sound effects. And I think, Ted, you found that you could actually run Opolua on other platforms as well?
Yeah, certainly on Android it's available as an emulator, and there's also an emulator on Windows 11 for those that want to do it. I'll put some links in the show notes to that. But that takes me right back. I wish you'd put a picture of Fairway in and not the Formula One thingy, because the Fairway one was the one that I spent more time with. But yeah, what a slice of nostalgia that is, eh? Blimey.
Yeah, you'll see the Fairway running in full colour with sound effects in my upcoming Nokia 9210 communicator review in video form, and that'll be one of the demos to say. And just to prove it's fully working, here are my Scion and early communicator apps from a quarter of a century ago, still working fine. So I had fun playing a few holes of my own Fairway, and you'll see it on video camera.
Brilliant. Although I do remember, I was more kind of into the texting stuff rather than the graphic stuff, you know, like databases and stuff. And I used to love doing that. In fact, I wrote 2 or 3 databases to add to the pots, which is probably in your library somewhere. So yeah, cool.
This really made me smile because I love the fusion of new tech and old tech, and I particularly love emulation with old games. Yeah, it just really made me smile.
We're not going to have time for any of these contributions and news stories, really. So, unless there's something, Steve, do you want to pick anything out particularly to cover?
I'm just browsing through now. I think that we could probably leave them to the next show and cover them. I'm sure you'll need extra content. That they've all got detailed links and things you need to cover. So save them for the next show. Yeah,
we'll do that, and we'll put an in-between show in as well. So let's get to photo of the week now and see what in the new look photo of the week. As you probably know, everyone, we now pick a photograph each. So Joe, what have you picked?
Yeah, I'm going to quickly mention that I picked this just before Steve got there because he was going to pick this one as well. I've named it A Garden in Basingstoke. It's by Chris Bates. on a Xiaomi 17, and it's edited on Snapseed. It's quite a simple image with a finger and a little bug on it. But I think it's a really nice little image. Macro shot, which I know you're a fan of as well, Ted. Is that a little hair from the end of the finger as well?
Yeah.
Just adds to the macro effect there. Yeah, it's a lovely little image. What is the bug?
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
No, I don't. Steve?
I have no idea. It's a fabulous shot, though. The depth of field and the sharpness of the focus is incredible. So lovely shot from this Xiaomi 17. And it's scary when you do macro photographs that involve your own skin. As you get to our advanced stage, Ted, you think, it's like, oh my goodness me, is that what my skin looks like?
Yeah, absolutely, because it does show it all up very clearly. Sticking with macro, I picked the Yellow Explosion by Fabiani-Laymond, which he's taken with his Leica Leitzphone Ultra. Is that I think that's the new one he's got, isn't it?
Yes.
This is a picture of a sunflower, I think, or is it a daisy? Some sort of flower. I'm not very good with nature, but I do appreciate, as you say, Joe, the macro stuff, the very close focusing things, which I enjoyed very much on the Xperia 1 Mark 6, if you remember, and that one does bring things very, very close, and as you say, Steve, very, very shallow depth of field like the last one. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's possibly a close-up of a daisy, just extreme close-up. But yeah, it's so hard to know what to focus on, because you've got the choice of, do I focus on the leaves or they try and get an average focus for the entire yellowhead, or do I focus on one specific spot? So it's always a subjective choice, but he's done a good job there. And the good results from this Leica yet again.
Yep.
Do you want my pick?
Yep, go for it.
I'm going to pick this one by Mark Mochan, and you'll never guess where it is, because a lot of his tend to be in the lakes. Loch Lomond. No, is Loch Lomond in the Lake District, or is it in Scotland?
No, it's in Scotland, where he lives.
Yeah, I know I have been there. Loch Lomond. I have got photographs of me on holiday cycling round Loch Lomond, Mark, and so that's why I gravitated towards this. On a Magic 8 Pro, it's taken on, and it's a boat ferry sailing off across the loch against a sort of sunset, or certainly a red amber tinged sky, and there's a lovely kestrel or bird or seagull of some kind just flying in the foreground, and he's even got the leaves in the top left of the frame, so he's got all the different depths, from close, medium distance, and then the far distance with the range of hills and sky. It's a wonderful composition, and that's my pick.
Okay, Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, just quickly on one Gavin posted. He has kindly given us for reference a wider shot. So that's in the comments on that one. So have a look at that. But on this one, this was one of my choices. If I hadn't picked Chris Bates's, I would have picked this. Well, it is a wonderful shot. Like I say, I love the depth and the play on size of things, like the bird being a similar size to the boat. It's really nicely shot as well. He's obviously waited for the bird to be just above that darker bit in the background there, and I love the colours as well. I don't know if he's edited this or if it's the natural colours or what, but I love the colours on this one.
Me too. Very orangey kind of hue. It feels like late in the evening to me. Anyway, there you go. That's our 3 picks for photo of the week. And just before we go, we'll have a quick look at classifieds, although pickings are a bit slim, I have to say, at the moment. But we have picked out a couple of things for you. Don't forget, if you want to join our classifieds group, it is a closed members-only group, so you'll need to email me and talk to me about joining. Otherwise, you won't get in. So my pick was a Motorola Signature. Hurrah! This is a carbon black, 512 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes, of course. David Burns is selling this for £450. And the mark in the sand here is that this was released in January, and it was £900, and it's now £450 at the end of June, which is a kind of sad reflection on value drop of things. But for people buying and selling, or rather people buying, it's actually really liberating, and you can get stuff for so cheap, half price in 6 months, and oh, wow. So that was my pick. Joe, what was yours?
Yeah, I wanted to pick what you got, but you already picked it. Do you know what? If I was going to stop messing about with phones and have one for 2-3 years again, I would take that Signature at 450. That's a fantastic buy.
Yeah.
My pick is by Atmar Singh. He's put up the Xiaomi 14 Ultra in black, 512 gig of storage, 16 gig of RAM. It's the UK version. It has got a small mark on the screen, but I think it's a cracking deal at 450 quid. Again, this is a device that was 420 quid. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading your one. I think it's a fantastic deal. Again, a phone that was well over £1,000 when it came out. It's got a fantastic camera system on there. I think, my friend Jermaine, he often goes back to this device because he was a big fan. So, yeah, a good pick, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, if you want to join in with Classifieds, give me a shout and we'll talk about it. Steve, show 900. Thank you so much. It's been a really interesting, nostalgic dive into the last kind of, nearly 20 years, I suppose now. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully you'll come back on show 1000.
Well, I was going to say, yes, book me in Christmas 2028, which I reckon will be about 1,000. I will be there with bells on. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
That's been great. Joe, any last words from you about anything?
I've loved it as a fan of the show before I became co-host with you. It's been fantastic listening. And I'll do everyone go in the show notes, and if you look at the chart Steve put up, it is brilliant looking at the timeline there of when different devices came out, different OSs come out, and it helps following the podcast, looking at that at the same time. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, we'll make sure all of that goes into the show notes for people to see. Phonesshowchat.uk is our website. 2 S's in the middle. Don't forget that. If you want to buy me a coffee, you can do that. It's at paypal.me/Ted Salmon. And if you want to buy Joe one, it's paypal.me/Hickey85. And Steve, have you still got yours going? Paypal.me/Steve Litchfield?
Absolutely.
Yep, so
recommended.
Buy Joe a copy, buy Joe a copy, and Steve a copy, and me a copy. I'll have the big one. I'll have the latte. And we'll be back next week with another show. Dan Carter's dropping in to join us for that one, and he's recently been reviewing the Honor 600 Pro, which Joe, you still got there as well, haven't you? So it might make a bit of an interesting comparison between you. Yes.
Yes, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put my SIM in that because I should come out of the Razor Fold for a bit. And then, we can have a good old chat about that.
Cool. Okay. So thanks very much for listening, everyone. And we'll be back on show 1000. But before that, show 901 next week. Take care, everyone.